Hello and welcome to the Seattle interview series number 13 with Seattle Storm head coach Dan Hughes, two-time WNBA champion head coach and two-time WNBA coach of the year. I want to thank you for coming on. How's the past week been for you?
Busy, but good. I mean, with so many college games and getting ready for our draft and just being a basketball fan of all types, it's been pretty nonstop game.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah, just with the draft coming up, and I know that UConn and Iowa game is going to be pretty big here. So yeah, when I think about it now, there's definitely a lot of basketball going on. So I want to get right to it. What inspired your career in coaching? I mean, you started with the Charlotte Sting in 1999 as an assistant. What fell into place for you to say, "Hey, I want to coach"?
Well, it was a high school team. I grew up in a little town in Ohio called Lowell, and we were part of a consolidated school district called Fort Fry, which is very small. But they had a really good team in 1962. I was 7 years old. And that team influenced me. And the coach, I wanted to be a coach. And that's where the beginnings, that's where the inspiration started. And that's pretty much held true almost my whole life. I'm not a lot different in my desire to wanting to be a coach from that moment on.
I mean, so you spend some time with Charlotte, and at least in the WNBA, you spent some time with Charlotte and Cleveland. Cleveland no longer part of the league, and then San Antonio, now Las Vegas. What factored into retiring with Vegas in 2006? Well, not with Vegas, but retiring in 2016. What made you want to step away at the time?
Well, I had been in San Antonio for 12 years, and I had raised my, a lot of times when you're a coach, I've always been really conscious of my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids, I was able my daughter went all 12 years in one grade, and my son went from the second grade to the time he graduated. Well, my son was graduating. He was a basketball player. He was going to the United States Air Force to play basketball as well as to go to the academy. And I thought it was just a good time, for me at that point. And I'd had a good career. I had coached men, I had coached women. I had a lot of things. I didn't have a championship in my pocket, but relationships meant so much to me. I'd had an awful lot of good ones there, but so I stepped away. But then, sometimes life is funny. You think you know what's going to happen, and it doesn't. And a year later, I ended up back with in the WNBA with Seattle, and with a chance for championships that have since followed.
What really opened the door for you? Was it that position being vacant, or was it just the opportunity that arose? Was that what sort of drew you back in?
No, to be honest with you, it was the players. I'll just give you an example. One time, I had been associated or coached against a lot of the players that I now coach. And when the opportunity came that job was available, it was different. It was one that I felt like the culture was already established in a way that matched me. And my wife and I, at that point, our son had gone off to college, and it was just the two of us. And she felt the same way. To be honest with you, one time she had a conversation with Breanna Stewart. She said, my husband would love to coach you, as almost all of us would.
Yeah.
It's not a rare thing to want to coach Stewie, but and Stewie goes, really? And Mary told her, yeah, Dan would have loved to have coached you. And this was during my retirement, before I actually accepted the job, when we were considering it at that point. So it just was a fit. it just was a fit,
Oh
and
yeah.
it was driven by the players.
That's, it's interesting to, hear about that because, in prep for this, I go through other interviews and there was one that said that, coaching Stewie is something that, makes you want to continue to coach as long as the organization will have you. And it's just really interesting to think about, being a,
Oh,
oh yeah, go ahead.
you're blessed.
Yeah.
With I've been around great women's players, have played against them, have coached them, all those kind of things. But Stewie was different. Stewie was one that I knew because I was involved with USA Basketball, and she was, even as a collegiate, a part of a lot of the national teams. And she's special, because if Stewie is, in my opinion, the best player in the world, but if Stewie was 6 foot and a guard, she'd still be a player. She understands. She's got all the intangibles and all those things.
That's, like you were saying, just blessed to have those players and the organization as a whole, such a well-run organization. I mean, for years, in which I do want to ask about, how does Seattle as an organization, from top to bottom, compared to the other WNBA organizations that you've spent time with through your career?
Well, I think everything is they do everything they can to give you the resources to win a championship. And those of us that have been in situations, and sometimes it's not the fault of the organization, but there is obviously pressure here to win championships, but they also give you the tools that are needed. They put the money into it. They create a culture that matches, financially what you're trying to do from a championship standpoint. And it's not always the case, that you find in pro sports, but that's been the one, whatever this, the administration has had to do financially to step up for the team, for the fans, for the people that work for them. They honestly have, and that's a very admirable thing that I have found here.
Yeah, no, just to continue with that, just to be able to have an organization that really shows that commitment to just continuing to be better, whether it's, what's going on in the court or even what they do in the community, is, it's, you don't want to take that kind of stuff for granted. To kind of speak more on the organization, what's your relationship like with Coach Kloppenberg? Obviously, took over a little bit for you partially in 2019 and, down in the wobble. What's your relationship like with him?
Real good. I knew him because he had been a long time assistant in the league, and then was the coach at Tulsa. So, I had known him mostly from competing against him through all those years. But when I took the job, one of the first things I did was say to him, I wanted to give him the space to really carve, especially defensively, his path into what we were going to do. It was a partnership more so than I'm the coach and you're going to do what I say.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that. I wanted to make use of his experience. I wanted to make use of his knowledge. I want the system that his father had developed. And Gary had done such a great job of mastering. I wanted to use it. And so our relation, and it's grown, to be honest with you. And I was very happy that, the year before I had missed about 9 games when I had cancer surgery, and he stepped in admirably. And then last year I had to work from a virtual stance, and we've just worked seamlessly with each other. And that's special. And so I think both of us treasure the fact that we work together very, very well.
I think that's really well spoken and really important, because obviously in some situations in any sort of sport, if you have those conflicts in coaching, things aren't gonna, you know, they're not gonna run smoothly. And I think it's really cool to hear that how it's like, hey, I think using the word partnership was so cool to hear just because how that works. I don't know, that fascinates me. Um, so we get to 2018, you know, and like you said, you hadn't won a championship to that point. What goes through your mind, and what kind of emotion do you feel once that final buzzer goes off in 2018?
Um, a feeling that I honestly had not felt before. Um, I was exhausted. I had put everything I had into it. So the initial moment, because it was funny, some people were like, "Are you okay?" And it reminded me, you know, I spent a lot of time in San Antonio, and I saw Greg Popovich win a championship, and I saw him just kind of sit down and take a deep breath because, and I thought, no, now I get that, because that's what I did. That the emotion, there were a couple emotions. One was that I just wanted to take a deep breath and exhale and just be thankful that life had given me this moment that I didn't think I was going to get. You know, I I could have stayed in retirement and maybe never had this moment. And the second thing is I wanted to find my wife. Uh, she had shared an awful lot of good and bad times, and I just was searching for her when that came about. But those were the things that it was a priceless feeling, to be honest with you, and but one that I was just thankful that I got to experience, because I wasn't sure that life would create that opportunity.
Oh yeah, no, was it almost some sense of relief and some sort of, hey, I can kind of sit down now and finally rest a little bit, you know, because I'm sure that whole throughout the playoffs, you know, I'm sure it's kind of a little bit on edge. It's a different feeling, you know. It's finally like, hey, you know, we won this. Kind of can sit down and breathe a little bit, you know.
Well, I think the road, you know, I'm a big believer in learning from the road you're on,
Yep.
the path you're on. And it's what I told the team. We had gone through an incredible series with Phoenix that taxed us to the limit, and even before the finals. But I'm a big believer in that. You know, there might have been a reason that my career was the way it was, because people kind of see you where you are. But the truth is, I had a very I had to be persistent in my career. Things didn't happen very easily or quickly.
Yeah.
But there's probably a reason for that. And I tell players that in some cases, later is greater.
Oh yeah. Speaking of players, what has coaching Sue Bird been like? How has that experience been? And what do you think of when you think of Sue Bird?
Well, I think of probably the best one of the best basketball minds. And I'm talking about as a player, as a coach, as a anything that I've ever been around. As her mind is just unbelievable. And coaching her, I'm glad that I had coached Becky Hammond in San Antonio, and I'm glad I had that experience, because I think it helped me understand. Becky has that same kind of qualities, and I think it helped me understand how to give Sue the freedom and empower her to empower the team, and understand how powerful that really is. And having Becky really had taught me a lot of those lessons in the number of years that I coached back. But you want to make sure that you empower a mind like Sue Bird. You want to give her the space, but you also want to be helpful in allowing her to teach your team from her position, because she's a rare force, you know, when you have her on your team.
Do you think, similar to Hammond, do you think Sue will ever go into coaching?
You know, I wonder those things. I wondered it about Becky as well, and I wondered about Sue. I don't know. You know, Sue is one of those people that can do a lot of different things. I could see her in the media. I think she's really good at that. I could see her being an entrepreneur, an owner. I could see her in a lot of, but she definitely could be a coach if that's in her heart. I think sometimes I'm always curious as to where they land. And I remember the day Becky Hammond said to me she wanted to coach, because I wondered the same thing about her. But it will be fun, and I enjoy this part of life lessons to see what Sue actually does.
Sorry about that. That shouldn't be going off. Um, Apologies. But I know that she took a role, I think, in the front office with Denver and the Nuggets. So even seeing that, I was like, whoa. But I mean, like you say, when you've got that kind of basketball mind, I'm sure it's just, you just wonder what happens, wonder what that next step will be. And I know a lot of us here in Seattle will just support her from whatever sort of standpoint she takes. I will touch more on Sewell here in a little bit, but I want to shift over to someone you've already mentioned and somebody that actually had on last week. What kind of growth have you seen over the years from Stewie as well as Jewel Lloyd?
Just what you would expect out of champions, both of them. They both are very, very. Matter of fact, when I took the job, my first, I flew to see Jewel and in her home, and then I flew to see Stewie in Seattle, because you just knew you knew they were great players and they were along the path. And what I've been proud about is that I think every year they've played, and obviously Stewie had to deal with injury, which makes it even more impressive. They've gotten better, and they have gotten better as offensive players. They've gotten better as defensive players, and they've gotten better as leaders. And that's what you hope for in young talents like those two.
What sort of, you mentioned Stewie's injury, what sort of challenges and how are you able to overcome those challenges in that 2019 season? You lose both Stu and Stewie to injury. Obviously you have to play around not having those two. How are you able to overcome those obstacles and make it to the playoffs?
Well, I think a couple things happened. And that's one of my favorite years of coaching, to be honest with you. The championships have been wonderful, and I've had others that were meaningful, but 2019 is one that I really appreciate, because that was a challenge to lose. The best duo in 2018 was Sue Bird and Breanna Stewart. The best combination of players statistically was those two, and you lose them both in regard to that. But I think what happened with us was that you had a lot of players step up in their roles, and you had leadership, which is an awful lot of leadership lost in those two too, but you saw the leadership kind of step up with that. And so people that had one role, the roles had to grow. Jordan Canada probably should have been the most improved player that year in 2019. Natasha Howard went to a position of being the leading scorer and those kinds of things. Alicia Clark became a absolute leader of what we were doing in a lot of cases. Jewel Lloyd is another one that people don't realize. Jewel had a major injury, missed about a month that year. So she was an all-star and it had really stepped up to lead us. Then gets hurt, misses about 5 or 6 weeks, has to battle back from a tough injury. And then, we're able to finish strong in that year. And then I think that, to be honest with you, you had a lot of players step up into greater roles in 2019. And then you were able to put in 220 what we had done in 2018, add 219, and it put us in a really good position for a championship season in 2020.
In reading about, getting prepared for this, I read that you had prepared for 2020 more than any other year before. Was there a particular reason for that, or was it inspired by, what took place in 2019?
No, I think it was because I felt like we needed to do a good job of merging 218 and what we learned in 219
Mm-hmm.
into the package that we played with in 2020. And so I didn't want to miss a beat. And to be honest with you, so much of coaching is about preparation before you ever take the court. So much. I mean, I know people think about it, when you're standing on the court and you're coaching the games, or they're thinking about practice. But as I've gotten older, I think it's really important that you put together a blueprint, so to speak, that can make sense. And this has been a very challenging year because of changes on our team to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I typically study every game from the year before. I make notes. Then I start to project, the roster and some of the strengths and weaknesses that represent it. But last year took a lot of work for me, simply because, actually going into last year, because I wanted to make sure that what we learned in 2019 was incorporated in. We didn't just go back and be 218 again.
Yeah.
Because I think it's ever evolving. Every year is unique. So that was why I had taken so much time that particular year, and I'm happy I did, because in an odd sort of way it played out well for all of us when I had to virtually go back and forth as opposed to physically being there.
Yeah, I mean, I am excited to talk about sort of working with newer faces here, but I want to focus more on obviously 2020. I'm sure you know as well as anybody, and you experienced it when you can't physically be there with the team. How are you able to get over those obstacles? Obviously, you've got, I read about the sort of virtual center you got. How are you able to combat, obviously not being able to be there and just trying to do everything virtually?
Well, I think it starts with the fact that we had a culture of players that were pretty familiar with what we were doing. You had a coaching staff who were ready to, Gary Kloppenberg was ready to lead us defensively, and then accept some of the opportunities to game coach that normally would fall under me. Noelle Quinn had evolved really well, and offensively she took, and so you had both of those two assistants really caring for each side of the ball in ways, and then Gary kind of putting it together. And so we were set, and then you had good internal leadership. You had Sue and Stewie coming back with the group that had been before. So we had some attributes going in our way. Then it was hard for me because at first I wasn't quite sure. I didn't want to get in the way of people that I think on the day-to-day were taking care of business, but at the same time, I tried to fill in where I thought I could be helpful. And at first there was a little bit of trial and error, but then very quickly it evolved into a certain kind of system where they could bank on me doing these things. They could bank on a lot of things. And the players, I worked at developing a kind of a running dialogue that started when they went down there and carried all the way through at that point. And it might be after a game. It might be leading up to a game. It might be when they wanted to reach out and have a have a Zoom call, have a phone call, all those kind of things. But I tried to do it organically and naturally. I didn't try to force it, in regard to it. And as I look back in my career, I'm probably going to treasure this experience, even though it was very, very hard on all of us, family-wise, for me to not be with the team. But I'm going to look back and probably say, you know what? that's a very interesting section of the coaching history that that I've been a part of.
I spoke with Jewel last week, and that was, really cool, obviously. But something that was obviously brought up was that season. Well, that season, in a way that played out with the wobble, and Jewel compared it to being at summer camp. Do you obviously you want to physically be there, to be with the team, but how would you have felt about that, whole bubble situation, and having to just kind of really be confined to just basketball, really? Because not being able to go off campus. Um, what do you did you ever kind of think, I was like, hey, I would be, not be able to really go out and see anybody? Or what do you think about the challenges that the bubble itself presented, not necessarily with basketball?
Well, I thought about it a lot, to be honest, because in our own ways, our entire world was experiencing some of those things. My life basically consisted here of being with my wife, and our bubble did include my daughter and the grandkids, and that's it. I mean, that was it. Didn't do things. I had to be very, very cautious. And to be honest with you, it was kind of a snapshot of what I think a lot of people across the world were dealing with. And I think even my life there was a lot of people, a lot of leaders, and you're even seeing it in college right now, where you had to continue to be a part of something, and yet you're not physically with them, or there were stretches when you weren't with them coming about. And I can only imagine how difficult it was on players to not have some of the things that allow for a balanced kind of look at being a professional basketball player. And so I thought about them a lot. I just think that our team and our league as a whole did a pretty outstanding job of making the best you could in that, you called it, summer camp situation.
Yeah, no, that was because I've only been to a sort of summer camp once, and I didn't like, so to hear that and just, the issues that it presented, I think, talking about the culture of this team and this organization, I think the culture, and the way that, having certain players step up in the bond that they have, I think that definitely helped them get through that experience. To get back to the finals, what challenges did Las Vegas present to you and the team, and how were you guys able to counter that?
Well, I think the challenges were they had beat us twice in the regular season. The challenges were that they had, that they're a very talented team, as we are. I think one of the advantages we have was we were pretty whole. We had stayed healthy. You had Sue back on the court. You had a lot of things. We were without Sammy in the finals because of the birth of her child. But and you had Vegas, who, Hamby gets hurt. And, to be fair, that's a big loss. I had drafted Hamby. I know how good she was, in regard to it. So, but that's one of the things that in championship years happen is, you have to have some luck as far as the health situation. And I think we were healthy, and I think we were experienced in situations, because of 218, that also helped us.
And, even with Vegas, somebody that, as part of the Seattle little thing, somebody that got injured even before that season was Kelsey Plum. And, they didn't have her throughout that.
That's true. Yeah, Plum, that's a big loss. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you stated it pretty well. With any championship team, you're going to have a little bit of luck in the injury field. And I'm sure you could look at any championship team across any sport, and that's going to be the case. Because, the whole season, I guarantee you there's no way one team stays completely healthy. So putting it, if I had to put you on the spot and you had to compare 218 and 220, could you say that either title means more to you, or you can't really put a deciding factor on one of them?
Well, it's like children. Do you do you love one of your kids more than the other? Um, I I think your first one is always a very special moment. But the truth is that as time goes on and you look at the world we were dealing with, I got a feeling 220 is going to grow in my mind too. So no, I'm just thankful. I mean, I very easily could have had a career that was very fruitful, but without championships. And now we've had two, and they were both incredibly different. And I'm just very thankful for that.
Has there been any difficulty trying to, keep in contact with everybody on the team? Obviously, some people are over doing EuroLeague. Stewie's over, across seas, and I know there's a bunch, Mercedes and newly acquired Kidulu. But I mean, normally I know that, obviously there'd be sort of team activities and such. Has there been any difficulty in trying to, keep in contact with everybody, or is it just, it's just virtual and that's how it's been?
No, I think there's always challenges because they're not all domestic; they're across the world. And I'm not a person that feels like I want them to know that if they need something 24/7, I'm available. But I'm not bugging them on a daily basis. I am not one of those. There's periodic moments that we come back and forth with each other, and I hope and I think they know that if they need something, there's no time I'm not available. But I don't bug them a little bit. I think part of the trust that they're pros and playing in other situations, and more is not always better.
Yeah.
I would rather have a quality interaction and have it periodically than I would just bugging them. And I respect them as adults. I respect them as members of other teams. And I really, now, when they're with us, that's a different matter. Every day I want to make sure there's communication, but I don't necessarily feel like that that's appropriate in some cases when they're playing overseas.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that definitely makes sense. So these might be interesting. Do you have a favorite team to play against in the league? Is there anybody that you enjoy going up against? I know that when I asked Jewel, she enjoys playing against Phoenix because you're playing against Diana Taurasi. But is there any team that you just really enjoy going against?
No. What is interesting to me is that what has developed for a while now is about half the league are my former assistants. If you look, and that's an interesting experience because you root for them, but at the same time you compete with them. So I kind of appreciate it when I'm not playing against one of my former assistants, but that's fine if we do. All bets are off when the games are on. But I really enjoy playing in New York. I not because I want to play Brooklyn. I mean the net, the Liberty or anything like that. Madison Square Garden has always, and now we play in Brooklyn, great arena too. But I really enjoy playing in the Garden. That was special to a little guy from Lowell, Ohio, to be in maybe the most famous venue, in the world.
I think that addresses the next question I had, was if you had a favorite away arena to play at. That might I think that would take the cake for you then.
Yeah, that's it.
And
what's really neat is that I think some people knew it. And when I retired the first time, the organization, Madison Square Garden, sent me a picture of the last game I coached there, me on the bench and everything. I have it up in my home. And it didn't play out that way, that was my last game. But, I just, we played in some great places through the years, but the Garden would be the one that was most special for me as an away team coming in.
If I had to ask you if there was a funniest player in the locker room to you, could you identify somebody?
Talking about on my team right now.
Yes. Yes.
Wow, that's a really good question. Um, that's a really good question. I don't know if I could, to be honest with you. I think there's humor is definitely part of the culture that we have, but there's actually several that I think, can kind of fall under that category. And I don't know if there's just one that we would all point to. But I do appreciate, boy, I can think of humorous moments with just about every one of them. So I don't know if I could point to just one.
Speaking about, moments with some of these players, Sammy Whitcomb, Natasha Howard, Alicia Clark are no longer on the team anymore. What are you going to miss about those players, whether it be just as people, as well as, having their presence on the court?
Well, I'll miss them all three from the standpoint of there were the things we shared, the people that they are, I as you really get to know people and it through competition, you miss the times that you shared. But the one thing that I'm so aware of, and I tell the teams every year is unique that I have been in the league, but also anytime there's great amount of success, there's change is going to probably be a part of it also. That's just inevitable, in regard to it. But all those people were special to me because they were so influential, I think, in what went on in my time in Seattle.
Yeah, that it was tough seeing them go, but like you said, when there's any sort of success, it's, not going to always going to be able to keep the entire band together. That never will be the case, just whether it's money or people wanting to play different situations. It's just how it's going to come down. But I think all three of those women are always going to have a place here in Seattle. And I don't think that's ever any doubt. Just, happy that they, had their time here, really. To get to those new faces, Candace Dupree, Stephanie Talbot, Katie Lou Samuelson, Micaiah Herbert Harrigan, Ty Young, Haley Gorecki. How are you feeling about next season? Because I shouldn't obviously buy into some of these things, but I looked at Bleacher Report had a grade for the team's offseason and it gave it a D. I thought that was blasphemous, But how are you feeling about next season as well as some of these newer players?
Well, we have work to do, to be honest with you. I think we have to understand training camp is pretty important to us, as it was in 218. It's not as it was in 219 when you take Sue and Stewie away from it. So we need to, there's things that kind of go with, this is a different team. This is a team. Yet, yes, you have some of the essence of excellence that we've had in the past, but it's a new team coming out of it. So we have work to do in training camp. We have work to do along the way. I think there's enough change that this team has to reinforce who they are, and that's going to take a little growth. I think those of us that have been around the block. Even when I came in 218, you're coming off a year where we were the 8th seed and 15 and 19 or 20, whatever the year was. And we lost the first game of the year, for example, and then started to find out who we were and build confidence in who that is. We'll have to go through a similar trek in 221. But the only thing that I would say is that I do think you've got some really good pieces still there. And I do think that it's positioned us for the future with some of the new pieces. Now, Candace Dupree is a little different. Candace comes in and we use every bit of her veteran things, but almost everybody else that comes in is part of the future with the Storm as far as many years down the road.
Mm-hmm. I think to kind of bring back what you mentioned earlier, the journey is going to sort of, you know, really shape how you guys continue throughout the year. I don't know. I'm excited for it. I saw everything that took place, and it sucks to lose people, but hey, I trust the organization, and it's like you said right there with pieces for the future. It's I don't know. I'm ready to get back into the season. Um, have you been able to see anything about the new jerseys yet, or do you care about any of the new rebranding, or is it hey, I'm the coach, I have things to worry about that aren't apparel wise, I guess.
No, I liked it. I'm talking mostly as a fan of it. Not, I had nothing to do with creating it or doing that. I have a hoodie that's got it on the front, and I got a T-shirt that I wore the other day for a meeting, and I think it looks good, at that point. But it's something that I like the fact. I think we in sports have to embrace going to the future a little bit, and it's the same. We would have all loved to have had the same team back. In 2021 that we had in 2020. I think we were all open to that, but that isn't the reality of how things often happen. And it's the same way with branding us to the future. I like what I see of it. It represents us going to the future, which I think is really important, that you're always looking for a better way in life, let alone even if you've had a successful life, you're still looking for a better way. And maybe this emblem just kind of symbolizes that to us.
Speaking about newer things, how excited are you to get back in formerly Key Arena, Climate Pledge Arena, when that's all ready? Because obviously, I don't think that'll be ready by the time the season starts. I think from what I was reading, it'll be more ready towards the end of season playoff time. How excited are you just to get back in the building? Because obviously, teams been playing in up in Everett and at at UW. How excited are you just kind of get back into a almost sort of home, I guess you could say?
Well, I'm very excited, to be honest with you, and I'm excited for the fans. It was amazing the number of fans that followed us to Everett, for example, or University of Washington when we were there. It was very much appreciated and certainly noticed by me. But being back in Seattle, Key Arena was truly, truly rocking in 2018. And being able to come back into Seattle and into a new arena will be very special for the fans. It'll be very special for the players. It'll be very special for the coaches. And I'm very excited for that. I hope that happens. I don't know what the timeline is for a lot of things, but that all being said, I have to tip my hat to the fans that were able to follow us to Everett, follow us to University of Washington. We still definitely had home court advantage in 2019 in those situations.
Yeah, I do have to mention my parents actually had season tickets. They go through Key Arena and then go up to Everett. I remember going up to Everett for those games. So that's it's just the fan base in general here in Seattle across sports is something I really, am just grateful to be a part of. And I'll take what Storm games I can get. Obviously it's not, sometimes it bounces from up north to, back down, but just having the team is, I'll take it. To get back to Sue, as I mentioned earlier, would you imagine or would you want to see her get a statue outside of the arena at some point? Because I know that I asked Jewel this, and she said that Sue's kind of low key and she probably wouldn't push for that kind of thing. But do you imagine that would be a reality at some point?
Well, I think it's got would I like to see it? Yes. I have no insight into whether it will happen or not, but is it a worthy thing that I think our community, that I think those of us that have had the ability to be with Sue would appreciate? Yeah. I was in South Carolina with USA Basketball training at their arena, and they have erected a statue to Asia Wilson, for example, or what she had done there, and that was really cool. I mean, I went out, as did a lot of us, and just looked at it and appreciated it. And in that same way, I think Sue, for what has gone on in Seattle, is very, very much a symbol of a lot of joy that I think a lot of people would share for those years, and for her commitment to Seattle. So I would love to see it happen.
I figure it. I personally, obviously, like you said, I don't know how that sort of thing goes, but I think I would figure it's just a matter of time, just because what she means to Seattle, both obviously on the court from those moments to what she's done in the community. Speaking of Seattle itself, you've had some, you've had some time up here. What are your thoughts on the city in general? Because obviously, you've spent time around the country. What do you think of the city itself?
Oh, my wife and I loved it. I always enjoyed coming to Seattle. It was always a long trip for us, no matter where I was, coming up here. I always enjoyed coming into Seattle. The fan base, a lot of the city itself was unique, and I would enjoy it. But when we were able to spend 2018 and 2019 getting to know the city, the beauty of the city, the rhythm of the city, interacting with the city, and we did a lot. We lived downtown. We really enjoyed it. It was special. It was just truly special to have my wife and I, get to know this new city, in regard to it. And that's, whether it's going to a Mariners game, or whether it's walking down to the market, or whether it's looking at the mountains in the morning, or watching the cruise ships come in at night. There's a lot of real beauty that I'm excited to get back out and continue to experience, in my time in Seattle.
Yeah, you mentioned in Mariners baseball. I'm really excited to get back to opening day here, just to have those experiences back, as we sort of work our way back. But I think I can speak for a lot of us and say that we definitely appreciate having you and your wife here, and just, what you meant to the organization. I want to touch on coaching outside of the Storm here. How special is it for you to coach with Team USA?
Oh, very special. I mean, it's, when you have opportunities to represent your country, when you have opportunities to work with the greatest players in the world or in your country, it's incredibly special, especially, in a world where, I've started as a high school coach. That's where my beginnings were. I spent part of my career with men. I've spent part of my career now with women. All those things lead up to a chance to be part of a national team. You just want to do all you can to make sure that you're appreciating that, but at the same time, you're doing the appropriate work so that you can contribute to the mission that these players are on, which is to win gold. That's honestly what is the beautiful thing about so many of these players, is that they put all their strengths aside and just kind of say, what can I do? And I follow suit. I try to do the same thing. What can I do to be helpful here? In our mission to try to win another gold medal.
If you could put into words, how valuable would you say your experience coaching with them has been, to your career as a whole?
Very, very, very valuable. The thing that I think happens in a long career is I have learned along the way, whether I was in Seattle and around Greg Popovich and the Spurs, or whether I was with USA Basketball and I was around Gino Auriemma, Don Staley, those kind of things, because I am coaching with Don, but I was around Gino for the 2 stints he had it was here. And you can't help but have experiences like that where you kind of learn about your culture and about how you do things, and how to establish good teammates with each other, and how to bring an energy as opposed to take an energy. All those things, a lot of valuable lessons, a lot of valuable. I'm a much different coach than I was 20 years ago or 40 years ago. And that's the way I wanted my career to be. And I very much want to continue to change, and hopefully for the better, through ever how long I coach.
Do you have any, thoughts or input on Becky Hammon and her coaching career at this point in time?
No, I stay in pretty good contact with her. I watched most of their games, watched them last night, play the Clippers. I think she is more than ready to be a head coach in the WNBA, or in the NBA. I think it will happen. I do believe that it will happen for her in regard to it. And to be honest with you, it's a real joy in my life. I just hope that people realize what I realize, is that might be the best hire that GM could ever make, bringing her on, because she truly is that special and gifted as a basketball coach. But she also brings a culture to the whole experience that I think is good for our world to see on display.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you have any goals for yourself at this point in your career? Or are you just continue to work and take things a step at a time? You're not really looking ahead at anything. You're just kind of, working year by year and, looking at what's ahead of you instead of, looking further than that.
Well, I want to be better. When I don't have a desire to be better, then it's time that I truly do retire. So I want to be better, but to me, it's about being in the present. One good thing about being an older coach is that I'm not thinking a couple years out. I'm thinking about this year. I'm thinking about this moment, and I'm trying to do what I can to help players, help organizations, improve myself in the moment. And so I don't look very far. I don't really think, well, in 5 years, no, I'm pretty much year to year, and I'm pretty much moment to moment. And somehow that is really works for me as an older coach. But I do want to be better. I think it's important that players see the world changes just like last year, and they need to see you ready to embrace that change and improve yourself. I don't spend much time in the rearview mirror. I spend a lot of time in the moment.
This is a little bit of a new part of the interviews I do, kind of like a lightning round for favorites. So I've got a little bit of a list here. Well, not a little bit of a list, but a couple of things here. Just, quick little favorite ones, sort of like a lightning round. Favorite breakfast food?
Eggs.
Favorite game day meal?
Changed through the year. I'm eating much better right now, but I'd say salmon.
Okay. Do you have a favorite Pacific Northwest restaurant?
Wow. I again have changed a lot. Belltown Pizza probably was was before. Now I'm eating a little more healthy, so we'll see. To be determined.
Okay, okay. Do you have a favorite Pacific Northwest scenic site?
Absolutely love watching the cruise ships come in to dock downtown. That's my favorite, and then having the mountains on both sides.
It's always hard to beat the mountains being out. It really is. Do you have
Yeah,
a favorite sport to watch outside of basketball?
baseball. I enjoy watching the Mariners. I root for Scott, their manager, and I really enjoy baseball. Kind of helps relax me in the summer, and I really like it when I can be there. But even watching them on TV.
Do you this is one's kind of hard to pick one, but do you have a favorite Seattle athlete, or there are a couple names that you could pick out amongst Seattle athletic history?
Wow. I enjoy Russell Wilson, to be honest with you, from a football standpoint. I used to watch Ken Griffey a lot when he played for the Mariners, through that period. But if you go back to like the NBA days and those kinds of things, I really enjoyed Lenny Wilkins, that group, when he was the coach here, because he also was in Cleveland. That specific team really, and he as a coach, and me being a coach, that meant a great deal to watch those teams those years, when, especially the championship year.
Do you think, to speak on the Sonics, do you think it's just a matter of time before we see an NBA team come back to the Pacific Northwest?
I do. I don't know what the timeline is, but I have been, I was fortunate to travel with the Spurs, and I did a broadcast when Seattle still had a team here, and it was Christmas time. I mean, it was amazing. It is definitely a big time city for sports. And I do think it's a matter of time. I just don't know what the timeline is for how long that'll take, but I do think that will happen down the road.
And then, reading about the 2020 season and having you had your home office, reading about how you had a Beatles wall was pretty cool. Is there a favorite piece of memorabilia that you have in that home office, or is it just, you can't really put a name on one?
Oh, no. The favorite is a WNBA ball signed by Paul McCartney. He played in, actually I was coaching in Cleveland, and he played our building, and we always, wherever I've been, we've always had a breast health awareness day, and they wanted to raise money for that. So they approached him, and he said, yeah, I'll sign that. Actually, a long story short, Linda was his former wife, and her mother lived in Cleveland and died of breast cancer. And so he signed the ball. Well, anyway, Mary, my wife, bought that ball. They had an auction for it, and actually they had it during the game. I was busy coaching, but she bought the ball. That ball to me is very, very special, because it combines Sir Paul McCartney, with a WNBA, and it combines breast health awareness, which is, I think, one of the greatest things that this league that we have done to support that cause. So that's the one that one stands out right there.
That one takes the cake.
It does.
Yeah, no, I thought that was really cool reading about that. I was like, figured I'd still ask just to see, but I definitely appreciate having you on. Is there anything that you'd like to leave anybody with? Or you just kind of looking forward to next season and
I am
back in those colors?
I am, and I just pray that the fans can join us. I'm looking forward to the day that I walk on the court and every single fan that wants to be there can be there. I don't know if that'll happen right away, but I just hope Seattle stays strong till we get to that point. Because I know once we get to that point, I know the impact of the fans in Seattle on the game. It's not lost on me. It's a major impact, and I'm looking forward to that day.
I want to thank you, and thank you for your time and all the time that you've put into helping this team add. Where am I? These two trophies here, and excited for this season. So I want to thank you and appreciate having you on.
Great interview. I appreciate it, and we'll look forward to crossing paths in the future.
Thank you.